Hello, you wonderful people, and welcome to another episode of Super-Fanta-Fi. This being a show where I talk about TV shows of the supernatural, fantasy, and/or science fictional genre. For today's episode, I'm going to talk about the season premiere of the originals, the latest episode of Grimm, as well as the latest episode of Sleepy Hollow. Like always, if I'm talking about something that you don't want to listen to, you can always look in the description down below. I include the time when I start talking about each of the respective shows. So, for example, if you don't want to hear what I had to say about this week's episode of the originals, you can skip to what I had to say about this week's episode of Grimm and/or Sleepy Hollow. Well, the first thing I'm going to talk about is the season premiere of the originals. I'm so glad they had the originals back. Obviously, last week we had, that somber farewell. I literally started recording over again, and I still stumbled on that. A somber farewell to the Vampire Diaries last week, and now we're kind of continuing in a somewhat shape or form in the original to a certain degree. As I brought up in the Vampire Diaries, I thought it was just going to be a 3-year time skip, but it turns out it's been 5 years. Once again, I don't know if those 2 extra years passed in between season 7 and 8 and I just forgot about that, or whatever the case may be. But nevertheless, it's been 5 years since they've all been, obviously the Michelson family is in the state that it's in. We see New Orleans kind of being readjusted to this new time. We have Vincent leading the witches, and obviously there's peace kept between them and the vampires. Granted, it's very interesting that the werewolves were not brought up in this at all. I guess more so than the bad blood has always been mainly. I mean, granted, everyone has bad blood with the vampires, the werewolves, and the witches, but definitely the witches, because, for the longest time, Marcel kind of kept them locked in their place. And then for everyone else, on top of that, it's they have the biggest problem with Klaus. The Michelson family's always, just because he's lived his life as a tyrant, so just everyone is pissed at him. I feel like werewolves don't have as much of a problem with him. I mean, they still don't like him, but it's definitely the vampires and the witches that don't like the Michelsons the most, so. But we see that obviously New Orleans is kind of under control, that basically Marcel's kind of kept everything balanced before. It's kind of like how the series originally was. Even though things weren't always 100% agreeable, the fact of the matter is Marcel kind of had things under control back then to a certain degree. Granted, the situation now is a lot more amicable. In a situation where it's everyone respects each other, they're working together. It's we all stand united, and the fact is that we don't like the Michelsons, and the fact is that they're done and their reign is over. They've killed and hurt a lot of people that we cared about. Now we can kind of take this situation and run with it as we please. So there's a lot of things to kind of run over. Obviously, for one, got to bring up the fact is, man, I can't believe I keep forgetting how much of a badass Haley is. The fact is, those vampires came after her and she kicked their ass hard, ripping one dude's heart out, then just literally kicking the next dude, and then start fighting and taking on a whole group of vampires by herself, and then going even more badass, going into wolf form. Because I also forgot, I was right, as a hybrid, she can do that, because the fact of the matter is, being that's how a lot of the hybrids learn how to break their bond to Klaus originally, was by learning to transform on non-full moons, so that it could the pain made it so that they could be free of his control. So it's something obviously I was I forgot that was kind of a thing that they could still do. It's something I wonder why Klaus has never done before. You do see occasions where he taps into that more werewolf side of himself rather than his vampire side, but still it's a situation where you never really see him transform. I guess because he made more so than anything I guess because he's disgusted by his werewolf side, because being part werewolf obviously it's a combination of a lot of things. Him being part werewolf is why his dad hates him so much, because it's oh, your mom had an affair, so I dislike your mom, but now on top of that I dislike you also for being the abomination that you are. Not only are you a vampire like the rest of your family, you're even worse, you're something else too. You're not even like my son, all that on top of each other. So maybe he's a little spiteful towards his werewolf side, because I never really thought about that too much. The only time he ever taps into his werewolf side is when he's poisoning someone with his werewolf venom, but I never really thought about that until I seen Haley transform like that. I was right, no one else does that. I also thought about it now too. I was right, I keep forgetting too. It's oh yeah, you and Klaus are the only ones left, because obviously when Tyler died he was a werewolf, because that happened back in season 5 when he lost his, the whole traveler situation made him lose his hybrids and things. So technically I think Hope counts as one too. Granted, she hasn't really shown signs, though it does seem like Haley is the fact that she's powerful, and that's her main reason behind it, because we have Mary Jackson's mom, She's there to help Haley because she's always, she always liked Haley. Obviously, she does not the biggest fan of the Michaels, and she doesn't hide it. She's like, should you really be trying to get them back? And Haley's like, I need to. They're my family. The fact of the matter is, I promise Hope that I'd find her a safe place so she can be protected and surrounded by people who love her, and that means her family. And the fact is that, they'd be the ones to help her understand like what to do with Hope, because Hope is something else. Like the fact is she was born from an original, not just any original, Klaus being the hybrid that he is. And then, so obviously there's a little bit of that mixed into Hope. So it's like what she is and what she's capable of. We have no idea yet. So I never really thought about that neither. No, but now that the comparisons are there, it's kind of very similar to, Caroline and the twins. When you actually break it down, Joe's kids, them being something special. But nevertheless, so she has to do this for the sake of her daughter because she, it's a lot to handle on her own. Plus, it's not even just Hope's family. That, the Michelsons are also her family too, especially when it comes to, obviously she has her special, feelings toward Elijah, and he has his towards her. So there's even more so that. But in general, they are like a family to her. They're the closest thing to a family she's ever really known. Obviously she got to be part of the wolves and stuff. I know I'm trailing all over the place, but that's even more reason why she fights is because this is her family. That, yes, she hasn't always agreed with things, because obviously her and Klaus have always had their problems, especially Klaus cursing her and that in this, doing this whole thing at the end of season 2 and basically forcing her and the wolves to be stuck in wolves form except on like full moon days where they can turn back into that whole situation. So obviously there's problems there, but she much like other people kind of did eventually got to grow, and it's like once you're part of that world long enough, you kind of get to see the Michelsons, especially Klaus, in a different light. Nevertheless, a very interesting thing that came up in this episode, because I need to get on because I'm just literally trailing all over the place, so I do apologize, is the fact is that we have Klaus. A lot of people gather on a yearly basis. Like I said, it has been 5 years. So every anniversary since the fall of the Michelson family, vampires, like all people who hate Klaus, like all the people he's pissed off over the years, come basically to gloat and be like, oh my God, look at, they come together to celebrate the fact is that the king is dead, essentially. But one in particular comes to town, and his name is Alistair. Alistair has a problem with Marcel's way of doing things, because it's like, oh, the fact of the matter is, you're saying Klaus is suffering. Okay, cool, fine and dandy, but no one has actually seen Klaus and seen him suffering. The fact of the matter is, you really shouldn't be leaving him alive. The fact of the matter is, you should kill him, especially because there's these rumors about the fact is that basically, as we know, Elijah is still alive, because if he was dead, all those from his bloodline would be dead too, but they're not. So obviously in some shape or form, Elijah is still alive, even though you bit him and everything. So it's like, oh, there's a rumor going around that basically they fused themselves, that they exist somewhere. Their lives are tied to Klaus's. So it's like, hey, if you let me do this, we can kill Klaus and then wipe out the rest of the Michelson family, or I can use his blood to track down, Haley and Hope, because Haley is trying to bring, the rumors spreading around about her trying to bringing back the Michelsons, which for Marcel, he's left them alone for obvious reasons, because it's like, more so than anything, Klaus wanted to be the corner, like the focus of Marcel's race. So take it out on me, leave Haley and my daughter alone, and it's fine. You can have me your prize, the person that you want and hate the most. So, like I said, it's so interesting because all this trails back to Davina, because Marcel felt like, it's kind of a situation where it's like, Klaus always put family first, always talked about putting family first, but when it came to family, he put his brothers and sister before Marcel. It's like, you say I'm like a son to you and everything, that I'm family, but you never treated me like family. And the sad thing is, the whole Davina situation wasn't even Klaus's idea, because even Haley can attest to the fact is, Klaus was completely against the idea of using Haley the way Elijah did. That was him and Freya. And just that one moment of fear and kind of a bad choice led to, all for the sake of trying to stop Lucian, led to all this, things being the way they are. But Alistair is dead set on it, because basically he's in a position of he's questioning, because obviously Marcel wants to keep peace. He doesn't want to start any war. Granted, he's one of the most powerful beings out there now, because even, with being what he is now, he can obviously kill an original. So there's no one around to stop him, especially now that you see that anyone that exists that could, at the very least, possibly be a match for him, at least that we know of, kind of died off in the Vampire Diaries. Like the last like big threat was Cade, and even the Sirens, but they're all gone. So just kind of had to throw that in there. But nevertheless, I did love the situation of obviously like Marcel comes up with a plan, and basically it's to get Alistair kind of like to go into like a trapped circle with Klaus, and he does his thing, running his mouth. It's like, oh, the fact of the matter is, I'm going to come after your child. Basically, Klaus, like he did a lot of people, turned Alistair just as much like Lucian, Tristan, and Aurora used them as decoys to lure Michael away. And so basically transformed Alistair, had him kill all his people, including, I think, his wife and child, and then had him running for years, trying to be a decoy, for him, for running away from Michael. So obviously he holds a vendetta. But in that moment, Klaus kills him, strikes down two other dudes, and then just has a sword in his hand and be like, are you ready? Come, meet your maker. I'm like, oh, I love it when you're such a badass, Klaus. But then, you have Marcel put him down, because all of it was a show to be like, yo, y'all sit up here, you're questioning me. Alistair questioned me. It's like, oh, do you see what happened there? The fact is, Alistair kind of questioned me, is like asking all these questions about why I keep Klaus alive. This is the reason why. You see that nasty bite? The fact of the matter is, Klaus is one of the few people that has the antidote for a werewolf's bite. So the fact of the matter is, if the werewolves ever stepped out of line, once again, don't really know what their status is in this whole situation, but it's like the moment if they stepped out of line, we could use their blood, we could use Klaus's blood as a means of a cure. Plus, he also acts as leverage for the fact is that if his family ever came back, the fact is that I can use him to be like, yo, stay away, or, your brother dies. So. But Klaus kind of brings up something interesting later on in the episode. He brings up the fact that it's like, oh, Marcel, like you try to act so big and tough, but the fact of the matter is the real reason why you can't kill me is because you're afraid to kill me, because it's like you want me around, because you want me to see who you've become, because on some twisted level, Marcel still feels the need. He still feels like that small little boy that Klaus took in all those years ago. And, because no matter how much he hates Klaus is still like a father to him. And it's like, Klaus taught him and raised him and looked after him for so long, so it's like on some level he can't bring himself to kill him, because on some level he wants Klaus's approval. He wants to see like, oh, you thought you were top dog, but look at me now, look at the heights I've attained. But it's also because he needs to keep Klaus around as a reminder of not becoming the monster he thinks himself to be. Because he's always talked about the fact is the reason why he wants to keep Klaus around. It'd be like, oh, I could easily kill you, but I'm not going to, because I don't want to be a person like you, killing everyone that stands in my path and way. I don't want to just, just line my path with bodies like the way Klaus has lived his life. But it's also because it's like, because he's afraid if he doesn't have Klaus as a constant reminder of what it's like to tap into that monster in you, then I guess he's afraid he might lose control. And then basically he's berating him and being like, oh, Marcel, you're just showing you just what you really are, and that's weak. And Marcel stabs him, which in itself just proves how right Klaus was. It's always been a heated situation. I'm very curious to see where this will go between Klaus and Marcel, because obviously Klaus has got it in his head. It's like, when it's all said and done, he's definitely coming after Vincent and Marcel for this. He's like, he even tells Vincent, he's like, eventually at some point, I'm going to get out of here. Whether it's someone trying to come claim my head ends up inadvertently letting me out, or whether it be my family, I'm coming after you. But then you have Vincent saying something that obviously has an effect on Klaus. The fact is, it brings up Cammy's name, being like, Cammy always saw the good side of you. It's like, why do you take so much time why do you try so hard to squander that and try to prove her wrong? It's not like he's trying to. Like, the fact of the matter is, Klaus tried to be a good person. He legitimately turned it around after Cammy died, because he legitimately loved her, And it was like, probably one of the hardest things that Klaus has ever had to go through in his life was that. And it's like, he did turn it around, but events just wouldn't let him be. Like, yes, we all know that's the biggest thing about Klaus. He has issues, but the fact of the matter is he's trying, and he tried. Granted, just things didn't pull, like, it wasn't always 100% on Klaus. Yes, a lot of stuff is, but the fact of the matter is, he, like I said, at that time, he did try, and that, but I guess, trying just isn't enough these days. So some other things that went down, obviously we have Freya waking up, Elijah and Cole and Rebecca are all awoken because I think Haley had said it too that she found a way to get rid of the mark on Rebecca's body as well. But there was a beautiful moment because obviously like she needed the venom from the seven like main werewolf families, and obviously they needed. I didn't catch her name, but the final family that Haley needed is this one lady. She's like the last survivor of the family, so they need her. So she was the last key to it. So when it was all said and done, like Haley was going to let her go when it was all said and done, but Freya was like, "No, you made that deal with Haley, not with me." She's like, when it comes to protecting my family, I don't make deals. I'm like, ooh, because I love that about Freya, because it was like the whole situation of Freya kind of distancing herself, trying not to be like the others, but it's like deep down she is kind of a Michelson that, she's at the point that she will go through hell and back for her family because she loves them no matter how much she wants to. She obviously kind of denied it in the past, but obviously she legitimately loves her brothers and sister. So it's just like beautiful, powerful moment of like, oh, that's a shame that you're being all evil. Because I was kind of hoping, it just seemed like they were setting up that werewolf girl to kind of be around for a while, because it's like, we need you around just in case Marcel's bite comes back into play. We need you there for a ready antidote, because it's not like they took a lot of her venom. They just took enough to make sure everyone else got away, but it's like they could take more in the future. They probably got enough from the other werewolf families, but they just need enough from her to make sure that they can make future stuff, so they need her around. I mean, besides, the fact of the matter is, it's like she's a target anyway, because when it's all said and done, like she has the key to possibly ever making it so that anyone has to die by Marcel's venom again. So she is going to have a target on her back, and why not be with one of the few people that will legitimately protect you? I'm very interested to see how that all plays out. I mean, also part of me is also wondering, like, I don't know, there's a part of my brain that was wondering, like, oh, are we going to somehow find a situation where eventually she somehow ends up as a hybrid too? I don't know why, just for some reason I just got that thought in my head, just like, I don't know, because it just seemed like they were setting her up to be around for a little while, and I hope so. It'd be kind of interesting, because obviously they got to fill the roles, because they killed off quite a bit of their cast last season. I'm very interested to see, will there be any Davina stuff popping up, going forward? Probably not, but there's some very interesting things going on, because obviously Marcel heard whispers about the witches. Like, obviously, there's some people obviously witches have always had the problems with Marcel, but others accept him because it's like, yeah, Marcel might be who he is, but the fact is he's much better than Klaus, or just any of the Michelsons in general. He kind of brought peace back to the quarter and everything. But what I'm curious about is, obviously, there's these symbols kind of popping up all over the place. It's basically a snake eating itself. And to me, like, I could be mixing up my mythology, so do correct me, because I am most likely wrong about it. But I think the snake eating its own tail is Ouroboros. I know this mainly because of Hemlock Grove. I guess it's supposed to be like a representation of the endless cycle of things. I think that's what it's supposed to represent. But I'm also trying to remember, isn't that supposed to represent Jormungand too? The giant, like, serpent that envelops Earth. It's like a Norse god. It's a Norse mythology type of thing, like a giant serpent that surrounds. But isn't that what it's supposed to be too? So is that the same thing, or is that two separate things, or is it the same thing just from two different mythologies? I don't know. Because one thing in one mythology literally can be something else. Like, kind of using the Hemlock Grove example, like the fact is vampires and Upiers are the same thing. It's just a different word from a different language. So, but nevertheless, I'm very curious to find out more about that. And what's interesting is we see that Hope is tapping into that a little bit, because she started drawing that symbol a lot and she's having nightmares. So it seems, I was wondering what the main antagonist of this was going to be, because obviously the ancestors have been cut away. The fact is that I felt like Marcel wasn't going to necessarily be the only threat they'd have to deal with. It seemed like something or someone is coming, and I'm just not sure quite who it is. I mean, like I said, like, obviously I'm very interested to see what antagonists they set up. Like I said, like in the Vampire Diaries, they literally dealt with the devil in a sense. So where will they take us on the originals? I'm very fascinated. Like I said, I'm super glad to have the originals back, and I'm just very interested to see how this season plays out. Like, how will they get Klaus out? I kind of get the feeling like Klaus will kind of get himself out. Then once, like, I know that, and since I brought them up, I'm sure Aurora's gonna pop up. Just because she was never fully dealt with. Her body was, like, buried. I can't remember. I think they reburied her after they got, because that's where he transformed the way he did, was because they got it out. Like, you know, the blood that was in Marcel's system originally came from Aurora after she took the, drugs, because it was like, oh, because you have to kill the person first for it and activate. It kind of works on the same rules as a vampire. So very, very good episode. And now moving on to this week's episode of Grimm, a very fantastic episode. Well, we have, basically everyone finds out about Eve making her trip into the mirror, and so Nick takes it upon himself to get inside. He's the only one who can make the trip. I mean, really the only person that really can go is a Hexen Beast, but he's not about to send Adeline in there. It's like, she's got her kids, plus he's like, he's not going to put her in danger. It's like, as the Grimm, you know, he's going to take responsibility for it. Because it also ties into the fact is that, I'll go ahead and talk about it. It's a very interesting conversation that Nick and Eve ended up having. Because essentially it comes down to, like, you know, the fact is, like, you know, part of Nick was thinking, like, Eve's doing all of this for the sake of, like, forgiveness on some level. Is she trying to make up for all this stuff she's done? And she kind of brings up something interesting. The fact is, like, I was wondering, it's like, oh, this is all about her becoming Juliet again. But she's like, no, I'm not Juliet. Like, fact of the matter is, there's a part of me that is like Juliet, but I'm not Juliet, and I'll never be that person again. The fact of the matter is, there's a lot of things that Juliet did that can't be forgiven, but I am a different person. Like, it seems like she's kind of cemented who she is. She's no longer like, because before she was confused, she's like, I don't know if I'm Eve, I don't know if I'm Juliet, but now it seems like she's more like, I am Eve. Yes, there's parts of me who is Juliet, but I'm a completely different person from her. She was an angry, confused person, but, you know, and which doesn't justify what she did, but she did a lot of terrible things. But she's not here to try and, like, you know, make up for the past, because you can't change what's already been done. Neither her nor Nick can. What she's also talking about, the fact is that Nick, you know, because on some level he feels responsible, as we know, like, he looks back on everything and it's like, if he had never been in Juliet's life, things would have never turned out this way. But it's like, you know, the fact is, she kind of brings up the question of, like, would you want to go back to, like, us, go back, kind of make it so that none of this happened, just so that we could be together and be happy? And she's like, happiness is kind of not for her. Like, this is the life she wants. I mean, we, like, even during the episode, the love, I think the episode was called Love Bind, I think. It was the episode where everyone was kind of in love with each other. The only person not affected was Rosalie. That put it in perspective, like, Nick and, like, everything in his life, him being a Grimm, unraveled everything so that they all met each other. It's like, if it wasn't for, like, you know, one meeting, him meeting Monroe, it led to everything unfolding, leading to them meeting just all these different, you know, Hank being brought into it, then being Wu brought into it, then Monroe and Rosalie, and, you know, even Juliet turning into Eve, and then eventually Adeline being where she is now, them having kids together. All of this happened because of the fact is that, you know, just everything worked out the way it is. And it's like, we can't really go, like, so it seems more like, I brought up the concerns. I was like, oh, is it going to be a situation? Because I kind of don't want it. There's part of me that's like, oh, that'd be sweet. But part of me does just want Nick and Adeline to be together. So to me, this kind of cemented, like, I don't have to worry about it. It's like, no, there's no moving back for each other. It's like, I care about you and always will. But the fact of the matter is, it's like, okay, good. Be with Adeline, please. It's just like, you know, and it's like, not letting the past hold you back. The fact is, yeah, there were good times. There were bad times, sure, but there are also good times when it came to the past. So everything that happened, like, no matter, even though there's been a lot of bad things, there were good times that came with, obviously, you know, like I said, them building up the relationships they have, having the friends that they have. So, but that's just kind of an interesting thing, because, like, I kept bringing up, I was always so worried. I was like, oh, is it going to turn into a love triangle situation? Seems like that might not be the case. I mean, granted, it still could turn around and be like that, but I'm less likely to kind of think like that. I'm kind of thinking like everything's kind of set in stone, and we're just, obviously, like I said, full on sprint to the end. So what we did, it seems the area that they went into, which Nick was able to go to using the stick, which I'll really quickly bring it up and everything, kind of since I'm just trailing off all over the place. They end up meeting a thing and they learn its name, Skullface. It's very weird seeing him with the full body, because we're always usually seeing his face, but he also has a stick with him, and it's so in the back of my mind, they never really brought it up, but I'm wondering, is that stick he has actually the same stick that Nick has? Does Nick probably has like a small fragment that's left of this thing? Its real name, and I'm going to butcher it, so I do apologize. It's Zestoria. It's kind of its name. Like I said, I know I butchered it, but like it has a stick in its hand too, so that makes me think like maybe, just maybe, it's connected to that stick that Nick has. Like Nick has like a fragment of his stick, because once Nick crossed into this world, it wouldn't come back through because it wanted to stay on this world. And also, when it uses its stick at the end of the episode, it put its stick down and it sent out a shockwave. That's what happened when Nick used his stick. When those guys tried to take the stick from Nick, like in the second episode, they ended up getting blown back by the force of the power. So it seems very similar in that regard. So that's also another thing that kind of makes me think that too. What also makes this very interesting is that the place that Nick and Adeline ended up, I mean, not Nick and Eve ended up in, is the Black Forest, but it seems like it's the Black Forest at a different point in time, because the way that the lady that Sean talks to kind of describes it, which we also have Sean kind of learning everything there is, but I'll kind of get to that soon enough. It seems like it's almost like two realities that kind of exist, not necessarily parallel universes. Maybe, I don't know how to really phrase it, because to me because I was wondering, is like, did they time travel because they were in the Black Forest, but it seems like they might be in the past. Like, for instance, like how in this particular case, wherever they may be, it seems like Vessin kind of run free. They don't even hide their identity. Like when they die, they don't revert to being a human. They full on are Vessins. So I'm wondering, is it like a thing that, is it like kind of like a evolutionary type of thing where it's like eventually like the Vessin got diluted over the years? But it's like, no, Vessins have always just been Vessin and Vessin. But it's like, why is that? Like, I don't know, like, I'm trying to understand that more, but it's like, the fact is, it's such a wild place too, because when a Vessin dies, another Vessin will come and feast and tear that Vessin apart. And there's also people there, which I'm trying to understand, are they Grimms? Because it seems like they are Grimms too. Which they're, interestingly enough, they eat Vessin themselves. It's kind of like, they're kind of, I guess, almost like livestock. They're like just regular animals. So it's like, oh, eating a Blutbad is like eating a cow, essentially. Which I love the fact is that Nick had to eat some just for hospitality's sakes. And for Eve, that's gotta be really messed up, because it's like, as a Vessin herself, that sucks. But as for Nick, probably in the back of his mind, you also gotta think about the fact is, I hope Monroe doesn't find out that I ate Blutbahn. He's not gonna appreciate that one bit. None of them are gonna appreciate that one bit. But that's what it seemed like to me, though. Because even Nick said himself, like, this is all full circle. So is it like a time travel thing? Because, like, the fact is, the way Sean's friend described it is basically like, this world kind of might act like an afterlife, maybe? Because this thing, Zestoria, he is kind of like devil or Satan. And that basically, it's not Adeline or Nick he's after. I guess it was more so like, they're the first people he came across. But now it makes more sense. Well, I guess they're kind of like, maybe he wanted Eve as a means of drawing Nick in so that he could get the Grimm out of the way, because the person he's really after is Diana. The reason why she's connected to all this is like, he's something, like I said, closer to the devil or Satan, and he wants to, because I brought that up before. I was like, is he supposed to be like some kind of like Vessin god of death or something like that? But it seems like he wants to take Diana as his bride, which is like super messed up, which they're like, yeah. I mean, even Hank says that literally. He's like, yo, that's really messed up. And like, so everyone's come together for trying to stop this. I just love it. Like, full-blown team of everyone has come together for this. I am very curious to see if the HR thing comes up. Like, will Trouble kind of show up at the last minute to kind of help with this type of situation? Because obviously, like, that and the whole Black Claw situation, obviously that's kind of like, this is kind of more of a more personal, closed-off story. It's not as international as the last season was, because Black Claw was like striking up all over the place last season. But or technically season 4 too, because like that's why Trouble. Well, no, yeah, that's kind of what Trouble got brought into, in season 4 as well, what she kind of got mixed up in and everything. But nevertheless, it's such a fascinating thing. Like, I am trying to understand everything a little bit more about like what this is all about, what this thing, like, besides wanting a bride and that being Diana, like, why specifically Diana? Is it because of like, she, like, is she special? Because I mean, as we know, this is all some preordained type of thing. So was this like, is this thing stuck in the past and it's trying to find its way to the present day to escape the like life that it's supposed to have? Because as we know, like the Crusaders like broke this stick down. It's supposed to be a very bad thing. So once again, I'm bringing up the fact that it must have the stick, and the stick that this everyone just refers to him as Skullface has, reminds me and makes me think maybe that's the case, that like, maybe it's trying to change its fate by coming to the world, or maybe this really is some form of afterlife. Because it's like I said, it's very confusing on really how to place it, because it's like two existing worlds at the same time, where it's like one place you're kind of alive and the other place it's not like you're necessarily dead, it's just different. And like I'm really having a hard time explaining, but it's so fascinating, and I'm so curious to see, like, will we get any answers going further about this? Because obviously everyone's got to come together. It's like, how do we beat this thing, especially when the thing is kind of referred to as Satan / devil, which is so interesting, because it's like, obviously, I've been covering the Vampire Diaries. That's literally what the final season, spoiler alerts for like if you haven't watched any of the final season of the Vampire Diaries, that's literally who the main antagonist was, like the devil himself. Not necessarily the devil in the sense that you may know, but more so like someone who kind of became the devil. It's a whole thing. So I'm excited yet confused, because I have no idea like where this is all going to go, how this is all going to play out. It seems like this thing is like stupid powerful. Obviously bullets don't work on it, and I don't know how Nick plans to stop this thing. I mean, that's the whole point of everyone coming together to try, obviously, to get Diana as far away from this whole situation as possible. But everyone also going to have to come together to beat this thing. I mean, granted, Diana might be the key to killing it too, because it's taken such an interest in her. I wonder, is it going to be a situation when it comes to this world? Will it take on the form of a human? Will it kind of like disguise itself? As it take on the form of a human to kind of blend in with this world. Because obviously, like I brought up, this world and the world that Nick and Eve are in kind of follow different rules. Because in that world, it's kind of a sense of like, hey, like voguing isn't really like a thing. They're like full blown in their vessin form, because even Eve started slowly transforming, and like it started kind of forcing her without even against her will. She started kind of voguing. Slowly but surely, it's just kind of like her vessin side is kind of coming out. So maybe it's a sense of like it kills whatever human side of a vessin there is, because obviously it does seem like, I don't know, like what, like, because it comes down to what is really the difference between a vessin and a human, in the sense of the fact this a vessin can, vogue and from a human form into a vessin. So it's like, does that mean that there is a human side to a vessin, and in this world all of that is stripped away? Maybe that world is more like a purgatory, like I brought up, the whole afterlife situation. I don't know. But I'm super excited to find out. We are down to the last 2 episodes of Grimm. Like I said, I have no idea how this is all going to play out, how this is all going to end. Obviously, I get the feeling like Grimm's going to have I don't know, I could be 100% wrong, but I get the feeling like Grimm might have a happy ending. I mean, at least I want to believe. I think it's going to be a situation where Grimm kind of ends with a situation where it's like, okay, we all come together and, like, it's like, oh, everyone's leading a happy life. But then you have the situation where Nick is like, okay, I guess I'm time to go to work as a Grimm, kind of end off on that. Or maybe it's going to be a situation where we kind of get like a fast forward and we see an older Kelly and Diana working together to kind of keep the world safe or something, kind of keep the balance. Like Kelly is becoming a new Grimm and he's got to work with his half sister or something. I don't know. Just kind of random thoughts that was kind of flowing through my head. If you've ever seen the series Charmed, kind of how Charmed is, it's kind of similar to that, and just like the fact that you skip forward and kind of get a look at everyone then. I'm thinking maybe something like that. Probably not. Probably just the fact is that, like, well, don't worry, honey, I'll be back home, gotta catch some bad guys, gotta stop some evil vessin, part of the life of being a Grimm. Or not, well, I was also wondering, it's like, not unless it's a situation where you have Nick having to sacrifice his powers as a Grimm to stop this baddie or something like that. Give his everything as a Grimm and kind of no longer being able to see that part of the world. But it's like being a Grimm is part of who he is, so I don't know if they necessarily would strip that away from him at the very end, but like I said, never know. I mean, it might be one of those situations because that tend to be the how series finales go. Is like that's when they definitely start killing off characters. It's like, oh, like this is the final climactic battle. Not everyone's going to survive it. So I mean, maybe this is that case. I'm kind of hoping and kind of just mentally leaning more towards the lane of like, oh no, everyone's going to come out of this all right. At least, like I said, at least I'm hoping so. So we will just have to wait and see where next week's episode takes us, because next week's episode will set the precedents for what goes down in the series finale. It's like whatever new developments happening in that will really pave the road to be like, okay, setting up the ending. Essentially, is what I'm trying to say. So I do apologize. I'm just rambling on and on. So. And now moving on to this week's episode of Sleepy Hollow, a very good episode with a lot of interesting things that went down. But obviously, I'll just kind of start from the beginning, kind of work my way throughout the episode. First of all, we have what episode kind of picks up where obviously the team is trying to figure out more about Dreyfus's plan, because obviously last episode they figured out, oh, he's trying to bring forth the four horsemen. And obviously they dive a little deeper in this episode and kind of learn a little bit more that basically he's drawing a lot of what he's trying to do from I forgot the name of the cult, but it's not really a cult. It's more like a fanatic group that basically believes like that the horsemen don't have to necessarily be used for a destructive apocalypse, because the apocalypse could also mean great change. And so in the sense of like, as we've seen with Dreyfus's vision, we already know, but now we have the situation of the group knowing. Also in this episode, they also found out him being immortal. I was like, y'all didn't know that? I was like, oh, right. Because they have not run into Dreyfus since the whole Philosopher's Stone situation where he gained his immortality. They haven't really met him. They thought he was alive, but they didn't realize what he'd become. I completely didn't realize they of course they wouldn't know that. We as the audience would, but they themselves wouldn't. But nevertheless, this is all connected to a gun that Banneker tried to hide a long time ago. It's a powerful thing because each one of the horsemen needs a special item, I guess, in their whole ritual of things when it comes to the body and the particular host. It has to be a totem that kind of, acts as part of the spell. Like the best example is with the horseman of death. His axe is his totem. Then I think it was for Helena. Hers was the justice scales, I think. Or maybe that was Logan's. But nevertheless. And this gun acts as the final piece. It acts as a means of transforming the said host into the Horseman of War. But upon, because they ended up meeting this strange girl. I mean, she goes by the name Laura. But the fact of the matter is, I was like, who is she? I was like, oh, we're going to end up finding out that she's actually, Diana's sister or something. Because the moment she was there watching Diana, I was like, okay. And then, Diana said something I'd never heard before. She's like, you ever get that feeling like someone just walked all over your grave? He's like, Kramer didn't really give an answer. He's like, well, actually, in my case, that's actually probably likely to have already happened or something like that. But then I was like, who is he? And then, Jenny runs across her and sees a symbol. And I was like, oh, did you know her? I was like, oh, because the fact is that her and Jenny went at it and they were blocking each other, fighting each other. She kept up pretty good with Jenny. I was like, dude, she's good. But then, and then I'm obviously I'll skip to it and just make it go to it already. And we end up fighting. And it took me a while, but I pieced it together. And I was so happy. I was like, wait a minute. You're Molly from the future, aren't you? And I was right, because everything she said just kept getting to me. It's like, at first she was like, oh, the fact is Dreyfus brought me in and he was actually kind of kind to me in a weird way. I was like, wait a minute. The only person we really know him doing that to it's like Molly? And then she also brought up other things being like, the fact is that she knew exactly what he was going to do. No one else knows, because even his whole vision of being the new form of democracy, that was something only Dreyfus and we as the audience know. So no one else would know that unless they were from that particular time. But it's like, that's Molly. That's why she's so adamant about not getting Diana and Crane involved, because she wants to protect them. Because it turns out, because I was wondering, I was like, because Joe and Dreyfus already knew she was there. So Michael, what I was wondering was it doesn't seem like they summoned her, because she talks about the fact that Crane from her time is the one that helped send her back here. So I'm wondering, I was like, well, really quickly, it was kind of making me think, because they were saying oh, you got here too quickly. I guess it's a sense of they were expecting her. They knew she was on her way, mainly because of his visions, I think. I don't know. I didn't really kind of understand that. What did they want her here? What would be the purpose? Because we end up finding, well, I know I'm kind of going all over the place because I'm just so much. This episode was so good with those twists. It also explains why she was able to keep up with Jenny like that, knows her moves. It's like, oh, she saw my moves before they happened. It's because Jenny most likely trained her in the future. But getting to it is the reason why she, for one, knows so much about magic. Also, is because of, they're the ones that brought, well, probably Dreyfus, but also, well, because it seems like that basically this day in particular is the last day that Molly ever saw her mom. Because after this, her mom, Diana, was the one who would eventually become the Horseman of War on that very day. I was like, dude, it never once crossed my mind it would have been Diana. I was 100% set on it being Molly. Because if you don't know, last episode I brought up, I was like, dude, I was like 100% certain it was going to be Molly. I had my reservations, but at the same time, I was like, no, 100%. Why? Because I think it would be the coolest day, just because it'd be interesting. But never once did it cross my mind to think Diana would be the real Horseman of War. But after that, Dreyfus took her in, and kind of raised her, and he was never really cruel to her. That's why she didn't really see it at first. Because that was another thing, too. Like, I was thinking that, like, it never crossed my mind that those two visions that he had first of him talking to an older Crane and him talking to Molly. I didn't realize there's probably a vast time difference between the two. Not probably, definitely is, because it's like Molly was still a little girl in that other vision he had. That's why what made him decide to reach out to her. But to me, I was like, oh, obviously it's like, oh, that makes sense why she'd be a little girl, because obviously we saw older Crane. She hasn't aged, so obviously it's a situation where it's like, she's immortal now, so obviously she's gonna stay that way. But then I saw older Molly, and I was like, so why is the fact that she's older? Does that mean like something happened? They got rid of the Horseman of War inside of her, and she got older or something? Or is she still immortal? But the fact is that she does age, but at an extremely slow rate. It's like, no, because Molly was never the Horseman of War. Her mom was. But then the episode takes a twist, even bigger twist, when it ends up being like, oh, nope, Crane is the one that took the shot for her, and even Dreyfus like, actually didn't see that coming. And I was like, dude, wait, what? Because just on top of it all, like the symbolism behind it, the fact of the matter is, I originally brought it up because like Molly being the Horseman of War, I thought it'd be interesting because it's like you'd be obviously drawing the same parallels between Molly and Diana and Crane and Henry. You'd be drawing those same parallels, but then, like I said, didn't never think about it being Diana. I mean, we never really got to look at the future, so we don't know where the four horsemen are in the future. But nevertheless, it's like now we see that it's Crane, and it's like on top of that, I mean, I caught little glimpses of the next episode. It does seem like a certain character is returning to possibly help. Won't go into it, won't spoil it. You might have some ideas of who it is, but I'll leave it at that. But it's like, dude, now you have the situation of Crane it's kind of interesting that Crane would kind of, it's actually on some other level, it's like interesting too, because now it's like Crane is filling his son's shoes as the Horseman of War. It was actually him who originally killed Henry, wasn't it too? So it's kind of like, because serendipitous wouldn't be the word. I don't know what the hell is up with me. I've literally been using the word serendipitous lately. I don't know why. I just been on that serendipitous kick, I guess. But I don't know what the right word would be. Not necessarily irony. I don't know what it would be, but it's like, it seems like some cosmic joke in a way that he would end up becoming the Horseman of War. And at the end we see his eyes glowing red, his body burning up, and it's him getting encased in armor like that. And I'm like, dude, that is crazy. It's like, because it just never, because to me, it never really crossed my mind. It's like, because in your mind, you automatically think, oh, nothing ever is going to happen to Crane. I mean, granted, stuff happens to Crane. It's not like Crane's impervious. I mean, granted, he's in this particular situation. He's here in present day time because something happened to him because of a curse enacted and stuff like that. So it's like, and the fact is, he got dragged to, he was stuffed in a coffin where, I mean, like I'm trying to make it seem like nothing ever happens to Crane. Plenty of stuff happens to Crane. I mean, a lot happens to those around him, but it was still a situation where it's just like, I just did not see that coming. And I love the fact that the show surprised me. Once again, though, I don't know how I feel about it, because part of me was like, I was kind of hoping it would be Molly, not just for the sake of being right, because I just thought that dynamic would be so interesting, but I would have liked to been able to see what was Diana like in, as a Horseman of War. Because that is the question. Why is it that Molly never came across her in the future either? Like, because Dreyfus took her in, like he had already opened up to her, like present day, obviously, because he's already had interactions with her. But the fact of the matter is, just like, oh, your mom's gone, not realizing that he was the reason why her mom was gone. That this particular day was the last time she ever got to see her mom. Because I knew it even more so because Diana was like, yeah, she looks so familiar. All of these, like, oh, sorry about that. All these clues kept pointing towards it being like Molly, and I just thought that was amazing, dude. So I'm wondering, does that mean she is going to be sticking around for like long enough to try and fix this whole situation, trying to get Crane back to being, Crane again? So, I mean, either way, technically we still kind of end with the same result as still whichever way you want to look at it. Like, obviously I initially wanted it to be Molly, but we still have a witness becoming the Horseman of War. That in itself has got to mean a lot. It's like you have like the witness who's supposed to be there to stop evil becoming one of the tools of destruction. I mean, in this great case, I mean, yes, I mean, kind of a killing machine slash tool of destruction slash power of change in a sense, if you want to look at it in a more positive spin that Dreyfus is going to try and spin it in. So, obviously, on the other side of this episode, we also dealt with the whole Alex and Jake situation. Because Jenny had brought up a conversation. She was like, oh yeah, I want you guys to tell me how we should handle this situation. Because like, okay, so got any ideas? And Alex and Jake were looking at like, wait, what? You're asking us for ideas? It's like, yeah, I might not always be around. And they're trying to figure out like what she meant by that. Obviously, because Jenny's still in the process of being like trying to decide what she wants to do. Obviously, she got that job offer last episode, and now she has a little more leeway time. But what she's trying to do is help with this whole Dreyfus situation, stop him and stuff, then kind of go off. She wants to make sure everything's like, a little under control and everything before she goes off, does her thing. But still, I think it's a situation where she is still 100, not really sure. There's a part of her that wants to go, but I'm sure there is a part of her that wants to stay too. I'm sure on some level, maybe for Jenny, it's also about the fact that it'd be too hard for her to stay, just because it's like she feels like, yeah, this is where Crane is supposed to be, doesn't necessarily mean, the whole conversation that came up last episode about family and everything. It's not necessarily where she, should be. So, but nevertheless, we had Joe capturing Alex and Jake, and we see a little more of Joe's power, which is kind of interesting. That basically he can mess with your mind. So basically, he touched Jake and ended up like burning him. And then when it was all said and done, like in that same motion, like after he started burning Jake, he went over and snapped Alex's neck. I was like, whoa, wait. I was like, wait, what? And then there was a flash and everything was back to normal. And he's like, wait, what? So I am curious, like how much of that? I mean, obviously snapping Alex's neck was in the obviously in that fake, but was burning him real? I don't think that was real either. I think that was kind of fake too. Basically, he showed him a possibility, like, oh, I can show you this. Basically Jake kind of explained it as like, yo, it was like I could feel it in my heart, like down deep in my soul. And for him, it's like, it felt too real, and he couldn't let them hurt Alex. So. Which also you had the moment of Joe bringing up the fact is that he's like, oh, the person we really should be targeting is Alex here because her feelings for Jake are just bubbling at the surface. What she tries to talk to Jake about later on, but obviously they get interrupted when Jenny comes to save them. But it's a situation where it's like, I don't think she's actually going to tell him. I think she's going to like probably bail out at the last second. Like he's going to bring it up. It's like, maybe like next episode be like, oh, so you wanted to tell me something before we got interrupted. She's like, no, it's nothing. Don't worry about it. Because to him, he's like, yeah, I get it. Like, you're my best friend. So obviously, that's what Joe was tapping into. She's like, best friend? Yeah, sure. Right. I mean, that's kind of what I want to talk to you about, but never got a chance. Basically saying that as long as if it doesn't have anything to do with your girlfriend, you don't care about, you won't notice anything like that, which, so obviously it's bothering her more and more, and very interested to see where that turns out, because it's like, obviously it's like, because it breaks my heart when it's like someone totally likes someone but just doesn't summon up the courage to do it. Why? Because I guess it correlates too much with me, because I've been like that like all my life. When it's like I've liked a girl, I've always been too, not as embarrassed, scared, whatever word you want to, whatever adjective you want to use to describe it, but just never been very upfront about how I feel about people. So I don't know. It correlates a little. It's a little too real, I guess is how I should put it. So Like, there is a question I am wondering: why specifically Diana out of anyone? Was it for the purposes of getting Diana out of the way? But like, why her? Like, there must be something specific about her that fits with the Horsemen of War. Maybe the same thing applies to Crane. Because I mean, it seems like they go out of their way to pick specific people to fit the criteria. And I guess like Diana and Crane are very similar in the sense of like their beliefs and just who they are as a person. I guess those things kind of correlate, so maybe that's why it's working on Crane. I mean, maybe since it is meant for Diana, maybe it'll be a little bit easier to pull Crane away from the Horseman because it's like, yeah, it was meant for Diana, not for him. So, but the question is, why Diana specifically? It can't just be about getting Molly alone, can it? I feel like for Dreyfus, there'd be a lot easier ways to go about it than that. I mean, I guess we'll find out a little bit more about it in the next episode. Be safe, live life to the fullest, and enjoy it. Good day and goodbye.